Good evening, Mark Reed. I'd like to go to page E11. And if I look at the both the tuition, public, private, and transportation, I'd like to know the assumptions that went into the projections for those increases.
The tuition?
Yeah, both the tuitions and the transportation costs. So that's 5510, 5561, 5563.
The assumptions for transportation include, we provide transportation through special education transportation using vans. So we contract with First Student for vans. Some students, depending on where they're being transported to, can be transported with a group of students. Some students will be transported one-to-one, depending on where the time of their schooling and the location of their schooling. That also includes transportation bus aids for those students who require aids on the bus. Some of our students have specific healthcare requirements, so the cost of the aids on the bus have increased, as well as the bus costs. We also provide individual runs, depending on, for example, down to Reach would be considered a run, since that bus is used in district, and then it takes an extra run at a certain time of day to pick up those students. Preschool students is a run, because we have 3 different times for preschool picking up and dropping off. So it assumes a number of runs, a number of vans used one-to-one, a number of vans used in district for students if they require transportation from home to Fawn Hollow. It assumes a wheelchair van for those students, we have one student using a wheelchair van, and it assumes the cost of aids. I multiply everything out by 181 days times the number of students on the van, or sometimes divide it out by the number of students on the van. So if a van is 260, a lift van is $265 a day, times 181 days equals $48,000. An additional run for that van would be 36, 4 days a week times 36 weeks equals $3,796. You add those two together and add 2% for the increase. So I do that with all of the different runs and all of the different vans we're using.
Okay. Can I follow? So there's of order of 50% increases in all these numbers. So does that correspond to a 50% increase in the number of students?
No.
So again, I go back to what are the change in assumptions that go from
some of the
this year
changes
to...
are depending on where the kids are going to school. So for an example, we had a youngster enter this summer who requires a one-to-one van that we weren't prepared for. So I had to add that into the cost. So that was one van for one child. So that was an additional cost. We look at what the bus company tells us how many vans they're running on a daily basis, whether they're carrying, some of the vans carry special needs kids and regular ed kids, what their runs are. So I base it on what I know at the time of how many runs are being used. If we have another student who requires transportation to Norwalk, right now we don't have any buses going to Norwalk, so we would have to add an additional van. I don't know that until we know where the placements are.
Okay. And if I go to the tuition, which is showing numbers, an aggregate increase on the order of 550,000, then again, is that showing, what is the increase in student population versus the cost, and how do you understand the differences there?
The difference is we calculate based on the kids that we know now.
Right.
Okay? And if in fact even since I've done the budget, we've had almost two, I can't say two, but almost 2 additional placements. It has been 2 since October 1st. So that were not calculated into last year's. We calculate the current cost of what the program is. We add 7%. So if CES is, I have the cost for CES. If CES is, we costed CES at $71,000 times 4 students. The cost this year, we increased it by 7%. It might go up 7%, it might not. I mean, we just don't know, so we use 7%. Add all of those students up with what the increase of cost is and give an estimate of the cost. It is what it is. These are real students.
Mm-hmm.
I exit kids who I know are aging out, and I enter kids who I know about at the time. That the line went up because the excess cost was considered in the budget from last year. We have less excess cost going into the budget this year.
Sure, there's a difference
So that's
in the
assuming
net.
the numbers of students times the additional cost, any increases in students, as well as a decrease in excess cost.
Right, that's a difference of 70 versus 60%, but still, it's an increase of 550,000 or something like that. For what are the difference in the total number of students between last year and this year?
There's 2 additional students.
2 additional students with an increase of 450,000?
You're talking about the tuition only.
Yeah, just the tuition. I'm looking at tuition and private, putting them together. I understand there's some balancing issues there. But we're looking at an aggregate of taking into account the difference in the net for the excess, $400,000 to $450,000 for 2 additional students. Am I missing something?
That amount is not going to 2 students. I think if you look at the change in the excess cost grant,
Right,
the
that's
numbers
the
are depressed in the budget book for what is, for the tuition, because those are the placeholders that make accounting manageable to track the excess cost grant. So the tuition this year for the proposed budget is increasing considerably because we are not anticipating the subsidy will be there. So you have the normal increases and true up for the students that we have. And then the larger factor is the differential and excess cost grant now must be borne by the district in the operating budget. And so that is the vast majority of that shift. It is not the placements per se, it is the lack of funding from the state.
But just so I understand it, so if I look at the numbers for 910, which are net 70% cost grant, right? And then the numbers for 1011 are net 60% cost grant. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I understand. Thank you.
Did you get the breakdown sheet on the 210 excess cost grant, Mark? Okay. Then you understand fully that we have children in the special ed program that are costing $12,000. We have one that's $208,000. It's not just numbers of students that we have to serve, it's the services that we have to provide.